And you are podcasting with Gary DeMar. Let's figure things out.
Welcome to the Gary DeMar podcast. I'm Robert, that's Gary. Sorry, Eric, I always wanted to do that.
And we're here at the Virginia conference up in Chesapeake, and
The Berean Bible Conference.
Berean Bible Conference put on by David Curtis and Berean Church. And we got this is another sellout crowd.
Oh yeah, they
here.
sold out in no time.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of people that tried to get tickets and they were already sold out. A lot of people that normally come, so.
We're really kind of stuck at this particular place for a variety of reasons, but I think we probably could have gotten 500 or more people to show up for this.
Oh, I think so, definitely.
So
but I'm pretty sure David likes to keep it small.
Yeah, and this would go against what I guess Doug Wilson said, that there are only so many full preterists out here and so forth. So.
14 of us.
Yeah.
So all 14 showed up for the conference.
And and this isn't really being put on as a full preterist conference. This is just an eschatology conference that people come here with different opinions and things.
Back in 2018, David Curtis had Michael Heiser come and speak, and Michael Heiser, he taught all day on Saturday, and Mike wasn't any kind of a preterist. So this is not a full preterist conference per se. It's just good, solid teaching, and sometimes the speakers happen to be preterist, and sometimes, in the case of Michael Heiser, the speaker's not even a preterist at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And this I think, good opportunity for a lot of people to come and ask questions, and that's one of the things that we're going to do here. We've partitioned out a section of the conference for you and me to sit down and deal with Revelation chapter 20.
Yeah, real easy chapter in the Bible. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had gotten an email that Eric sent me, and who normally hosts this show, and if I could find it here real quick, here it is. Gentlemen, this guy wrote, I don't know if you are still answering questions concerning this podcast or not. I have listened to this twice now. This has been so helpful to me. I cannot thank you both enough for all of your work. And I think I don't know if he's talking just about Eric and me or Kim Burgess and me. I'm not sure.
It could be all three.
Yeah. So in episode 6, a comment was made at about the 1430 mark about Ken Gentry's view of Revelation.
Oh.
Ken and others would look at Revelation 20 and say Revelation 20 is still ongoing, the 1,000 years, this person writes. We haven't gotten to the end. So this was a comment that Kim had made.
Oh.
And at which point Mr. Burgess says, in my view, it's a fatal mistake. And this emailer wrote, I wonder if you could provide some clarification on this point. How, according to this hermeneutical view, is the 1,000 years completed? This is a genuine question with no argument of my own to present. As a postmillennialist, I've understood the millennium to be ongoing. Could you please help me understand this in the light of your position? Thank you in advance, Daniel Montoya. And this isn't the only person who would raise a question like that. Yeah, it is. And it's a question I've always had. And so you aren't necessarily answering for Kim Burgess. And if we had Kim on here, I don't know really what he would say about it, but he would have to deal with some of the same things that you've come across and how this fits in with Revelation 20. One of the first things that I like to do with any passage like this is to talk about what's not there.
Exactly.
What doesn't Revelation 20 say?
Exactly.
And one of the things it doesn't say is that Jesus will reign on the earth for 1,000 years. There's no place does it say Jesus sets up a throne. No place where there's
physical throne, and
no temple rebuilt.
In terms of dispensationalism, no reinstituted animal sacrifices
or circumcision.
Yeah.
And I remember I emailed H. Wayne House, who was one of the co-authors of the book dealing with dominion theology that Multnomah Press published, and I asked Dr. House, he was a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary, will circumcision be instituted during the millennium, your version of the millennium, because circumcision is supposed to be an everlasting bloody rite.
Right, yeah.
And then his answer was kind of interesting. He said, I've never really thought about that, but I guess it would be.
Well, at least he was honest.
Yeah.
At least he gave you an honest answer.
Yeah. But see, here's the thing, Bob, and we've talked about this a lot at this conference. A lot of people have never really thought about a lot of these things. They've taken on to a position, they've held on to that position, they've advocated for that position, but when they are pressed to defend the position, now this is a professor at a seminary who said I hadn't thought about it. Typically that's the case. You think down the ranks of people who are thinking about eschatology, that's the same issue. They've never been questioned about it or never thought about it.
Well, that's that kind of trickle-down effect when you have somebody on the level of House who's never thought about it or addressed it or dealt with it. That trickles down to nobody else thinking about it, dealing with it or addressing it, in the level of a pastor teaching on Revelation or even a Sunday school class.
And that's why I often, when I go out and I speak, I do my little Bible quiz.
I love that.
Yeah. You ask people questions about the Bible that are Sunday school questions, and ask them, like who cut off Samson's hair is one of them. And most people will say, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, this is a little preview. The Gary DeMar Bible quiz and specifically the Samson's hair question will make a reappearance in, I can't remember if it's my first or second message, but yeah, I'm going to use that for a case in point example.
And so we'll ask the audience here who cut off Samson's hair. And I remember this story from years ago with a television program of some Western, and some guy said, well, here, you say you know the Bible well. It's who cut off Samson's hair? And Delilah.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it was Delilah until you go and you look at the text, and it's not quite right. And so we'll leave the listeners, you go check it out for yourselves. And the reason I give the Bible quiz is just to show people they don't really know the Bible as well as they thought they did. And when you get to a more complicated topic like eschatology, you even know less in many cases.
Well, and you were talking about reading things into Revelation 20 that aren't there. And of course, we talked about the dispensational way of doing it, the animal sacrifices, and then obviously physical circumcision. They read into it also, if Wayne House is any indication. But I feel like it's not just the dispensationalists or the premillennialists. First of all, let me just state up front that I agree with the goals of postmillennialism. I agree with advancing the kingdom. I agree with wanting to see Christ's kingdom victorious here on this earth. I agree that the spiritual kingdom has a leavening effect on the physical world. That's evident in our lives. We're saved. The new birth is spiritual, but then there are real changes in the way we live our life in this physical world. And I think on a collective level, that'll transfer to society also.
Right.
So I am not anti any of the things that the postmillennialists want to see happen at all. I never have been. But I don't think when you get to Revelation 20, all that kingdom victory stuff is there.
It's not there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's in 21 and 22, but it's not in chapter 20. So I feel like the postmillennialists are kind of as guilty as the premillennialists in that what they're looking for isn't actually there in the chapter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this, and you're right, because the dispensationalists, the premillennialists, look at Revelation 20 and they find, the saints reigning on the earth, and Jesus is in Jerusalem, and all that.
Just real quick, I think it's Walford. He has, I think the saints are glorified and reigning in the satellite city that's floating above the earth. And then the unglorified people, they're on the earth. So anyway, you have resurrected people in the satellite city, and unresurrected people on the earth, and the resurrected people in the satellite city are ruling over. It gets crazy.
And this is kind of the Band-Aid approach to hermeneutics. When you when you've created a problem within your system, when your system doesn't fit what you're saying, now you have to go and put Band-Aids on it by creating other manifestations of it in order to make it work. I'm an Occam's razor person. I want to go to the simplest explanation of the text. And if a text doesn't say anything about something, then you better start with it's not in there.
Yeah.
You got to make your case elsewhere.
And even I think we all have things that we can't explain because the Bible's a big book. There's a lot there. And if somebody asks you a question and you don't really have the answer, instead of trying to put that Band-Aid on it or trying to plug the leak, I don't see anything wrong with saying, you know what, that's a good question. I never thought about it. And if more people did that on all sides of this debate, I think things would be better. Just be honest enough. So, I mean, I don't pretend to know. It's a big book.
Yeah, well, what ends up happening, the more you know, the more questions you have and the more research you have to do. If you don't really know a whole lot, you don't have to do much else.
Yeah.
So we get down to the point of defining, like a postmillennialist, this person who wrote this email, the postmillennialist would say that the 1,000 years is an extended period of time, and there can be some justification for that.
I agree.
Where 1,000 years, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and the postmillennialist would say, well, God owns the cattle on all the hills, and the number 1,000 is a representative number of just many.
Well, I even remember David Chilton said, who owns the cattle on hill number 1001? That's the way he put it. So, but yeah, I would call that understatement. Like you're understating it. Like God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. That's an understatement because God owns all the cattle on all the hills.
Or one day in the court of the Lord is better than 1,000 days anywhere else. Same type of thing.
Exactly.
So that's a pretty standard view. But then you get chapters 21 and 22. So Revelation chapter 20, Ken Gentry, who's a noted postmillennialist, would say Revelation 20 is an extended period of time of more than 1,000 years, and we're living in the midst of that representative number right now, that we don't know when that particular symbolic 1,000 years is going to end, which would then lead us to believe that chapters 21 and 22 don't come into play until after
this extended period of time is over.
Which is not over yet.
Exactly.
So what's Ken's problem with that?
I don't want to misrepresent him, but he actually has chapters 22, 21, and 22, starting now, the new heavens and the new earth, which I do too. I believe we're in the age of the new heavens and new earth, and making things right on the earth is it's a work in progress. Right. So I wouldn't disagree with him there, but
it messes up the chronology.
It messes up the chronology big time. And
didn't he even write somewhere? He said he wished he didn't have to deal with Revelation 20.
Yeah, I'm not making this up. It's one of those three views or four views on the millennium, and it's really good. It's good. I mean, Ken's chapter's good. I remembered reading it and thought everyone in that book did a really nice presentation of their view. The interaction with the other authors was good. But Ken says something to the effect of, I would have preferred not to have had to deal with Revelation 20 in my presentation. Well, this is a book about the millennium, which is Revelation 20. But that just goes to show that all the kingdom victory stuff isn't there. Revelation 20 is not the chapter where Ken and the rest of us who believe in the victory of the kingdom, that's not the chapter where we can go to find that. And to me, it was really telling when, and anyone can get the book and read it. I'm not misrepresenting the man. I'm not making it up. It's all, I would have preferred not to have dealt with Revelation 20 in my presentation, because what the postmillennialist is looking for
is not there. So the amillennial position becomes more standard and more acceptable because it says there is no, I'm putting quotation marks around, millennium. just because something is 1,000 years does not necessarily mean it's a millennium, like we think of a utopia
Exactly. Well,
and so forth.
What's amazing, I actually have the quotes on my phone. We know G.K. Beale is Mill, right?
Probably.
I'm pretty sure Beale is. But I found another guy, since everyone always quotes Beale, it's Dave Mathewson. And it was in the Journal of Evangelical Theology in 2001. He says, as most commentators recognize, what is important about the number 1,000 is its symbolic value. It emphasizes not so much the duration of the millennium, but its character. Thus, what is important is not a duration of time, and then I have an ellipsis there, so I don't know what he said in between that. He said, consequently, to conclude that the 1,000 years refers to a literal period of 1,000 years, or even a very long period of intermediate length, is in fact premature. So I thought that was, and I don't know if he's pre-mill or a-mill, but I know that Beale is a-mill, and both of them have said basically they're taking the 1,000 years in the direction that it is an understatement. It's the actual 1,000 years is a lot bigger than 1,000 years. Well, the opposite would be hyperbole. It's a larger number representing a smaller number. It's like if I said Gary DeMar has a strength of 10 men, that's hyperbole.
No, it's not.
Okay.
What are you saying here?
But and to me, that's normally the way it works anyways.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say those 10 guys aren't as strong as this one guy. You use it in a hyperbolic way, not in the sense of understatement. Hyperbole, we do that all the time. So that's kind of how I approach it. And I do think it's interesting that I at least found two scholars, one of them a-mill and Mathewson might be pre-mill, I don't know. But at least they admit it doesn't necessarily mean a literal 1,000 years, and it doesn't necessarily mean a longer period of time. So
let's go. What we like to do is let's look at examples from Scripture of these large numbers, and let's start with the book that we're dealing with, the book of Revelation, Revelation 20, and also the 200 million man army, and there may be some other number as well. So go ahead.
That's a huge one to me, like right there in the book of Revelation, in Revelation chapter 9, I think, it talks about the 200 million man army, which of course the futurists think is China or whatever, but regardless, it's actually 200 million horsemen. These 200 million soldiers are all on horsemen, or on horseback, so they're riding horses. And if anyone's read Gary DeMar's books, there's only, 58 million, I think?
Something like that.
We'll round it off, 60. Let's say 60 million horses in the world.
They'll just reproduce real fast during the tribulation period.
Yeah, exactly. Either what it comes down to, they're going to reproduce real fast right before the tribulation period, or you have.
And they've got to come from China. From China, they've got to come from China.
Chinamen on every horse.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, coming all the way from China. You got to feed them, water them, go over mountains and all that. But then the critic will say, well, with God, all things are possible. And then maybe flying horses. We don't know.
You don't know.
So,
flying horses, those are missiles and rocket launchers. That's what the Hebrew word actually means. Don't you know that? I know Revelation.
We were laughing at this, but it's true because we both dealt with it.
Well, they say, it was Jack Kelly said that the Hebrew word for horse actually means leaper.
Leaper. Right.
Yeah, so it could be talking about missiles and rocket launchers and planes.
Well, bows and arrows in Ezekiel 38 and 39 are.
Oh, those are the missiles and rocket
launchers. And then
the leapers are the planes.
Right, and then the other was horses. It's really horsepower. So anyway, so there's and we laugh at this, but there are lots of people out there because they're so. This system, they have to hold on to this system. They will go to extremes in order to make it work.
And the bottom line is, to loop back to what we were talking about, most competent scholars realize that those crazy horsepower and missile and rocket launcher interpretation. They understand that's absurd. Most competent scholars understand that 200 million, that number's hyperbolic. As a matter of fact, Doug Wilson, what's his when the man comes around?
Yes.
Yeah, he's excellent on Revelation 9 and the 200 million man army, and Doug's obviously this is hyperbole. And I'm sure even if you go to the more competent futurist exegetical commentaries, they're going to say this is hyperbole. So right there in Revelation, you have an example of a larger number, 200 million, representing a much smaller number in reality, no matter how we interpret Revelation 9:16. If we interpret it as, the Roman-Jewish War, if we interpret it as a future battle of Armageddon, nobody thinks that number is literal. And then another one's right there in Revelation 20 with Gog and Magog.
Yeah, this is an important one right in the text itself.
Yeah, I think it is. It's after the 1,000 years is complete, and I don't have the text in front of me, so this is the Robert Cruickshank paraphrase version, but after the 1,000 years is complete, Satan's released from his prison, and what does he do? He gathers the nations together for the war, and in talking about the number of those gathered for the war, it says the number of them, it says, is as the sand of the seashore. And I actually looked that up once. And how many grains of sand are on a typical beach? And the number was 10.8 trillion. So the number of the sands of the seashore is 10.8 trillion. There's never been an army that large. There's never been that many people alive on Earth at the same time. I'm not one of these overpopulation guys, but I think if we had 10.87 trillion people, we actually would be experiencing overpopulation. So the point is, right there in Revelation 20, you have a number, because it says the number of them. You have a number that's obviously hyperbole. So John does that. The Bible does that. It's a literary technique that they use to tell the story and get their point across. This number is large. The number of them, it's a large number, but it's not a literal number.
And it's, I don't know if this is a very good illustration, but if you, frozen orange juice, for example, you go and you buy the little containers of frozen orange juice, you put them in the freezer, and you take it out, and then you put it and you mix water, and you get a whole lot more of it than from what's in that little can. Yeah. And so the question comes down to why that number, because if you read Revelation 20, let's say you're a preterist, you read Revelation 20, everything fits with that generation.
Yeah.
Except for the 1,000 years and the sand and the seashore, obviously.
Yeah.
So why that number in Revelation 20? What is the point of using that large number for a shorter period of time?
I think it just speaks to, the quotes from Beale and Matthewson, I think that's how you say his name, I'm not 100% sure, but they both emphasize that it's completeness, it's fullness, and I think it just speaks to the completeness and the magnitude of what was accomplished during that period of time.
Which takes us back to Matthew 24:21. The tribulation ever was or ever will be.
Exactly.
And even that language is found in the Old Testament, Ezekiel 5:9. That same language is used in Ezekiel 5:9 for what happened to the temple back then. And so this is
hyperbole.
This is audience relevance language. And if you allow the scriptures to interpret themselves, you're stuck. I say you're stuck. You're left with, hey,
this is.
I understand this now.
This is how this works. They're using hyperbole to make a rhetorical point. And back to Revelation 20, I think the passage has two endpoints that no one can get around. When does 1,000 years start? It starts with the binding of Satan.
Right.
And
which the Gospels.
Yeah.
So and Jesus said, here's the manifestation of the kingdom of God. You know it.
Yeah.
Satan is bound.
He's bound the strong man.
Same Greek word.
Yeah, same exact language. And any amillennial scholar is going to see Satan being bound at some point during the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ. It was a past event. That's when Satan was bound. And David Chilton, in his commentary, that's where he places it. So to say that the starting point of the millennium, the binding of Satan, took place during the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ is nothing new, nothing novel, nothing out of bounds. This is just classic amillennial for sure approach, and many postmillennialists. Back in the day, you'd read a guy like Loraine Bettner, who was post-mill, and from reading him, I think Bettner thought this was a literal 1,000-year period in the future.
That's been kind of a popular view, kind of maybe a Puritan view as well.
But a lot of other postmillennialists, especially starting with the work of David Chilton on, they're going to adopt the Amill approach, which is Satan was bound, and they more or less look at the 1,000 years symbolically. So I was just trying to make the point that that's nothing new or novel. And then the other end point would be the 1,000 years ends when Satan's released to gather the nations together for the war.
And this is the Gog and Magog war.
Yeah, which I would say is the Roman Jewish war, actually.
Okay. Right. In fact, as I was driving up here, I was thinking about this, that we were going to do this, and I thought, and you and I, and this, we borrowed this from Jim Jordan, we've expanded on it, that the Gog and Magog war deals with what's happening in the book of Esther.
Yes.
And it's Mordecai who comes to the rescue in dealing with Haman, and how Haman wanted to literally wipe out all the Jews. You can read that in Esther chapter 3, and you can read it in my book, what is it?
Gog
and Magog, End Time Alliance. And the thing I pointed out is what Revelation 20 is. There's no Mordecai to rescue. That puts an end to it all. The whole Old Covenant system has been done away with. God had warned Israel,
repeatedly,
leave the city, get out of town, and all this, because there's not going to be it doesn't say this. No one's going to come to rescue you physically with this. This is the end point. Destruction of the temple, the Old Covenant order, it all passes away.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I always bring up, I do not use the word millennium anymore about Revelation 20, because people think, well, you say we're living in the millennium now? It doesn't look like the millennium. I always go back and say, because Revelation 20 isn't describing what you think was the millennium
is. Yeah, a lot of people, they read a lot of passages into Revelation 20 that stuff's not there, so I do agree. I still say millennium because it's a reference point.
Yeah, I just say 1,000 years. The 1,000 years. It forces everybody now to think 1,000 years. Any closing, anything you want to add to this?
The only thing, this might be a little bit different than yours, but what I like about the Gog and Magog thing is Satan's released to gather the nations together for the war, which I don't understand how any preterists could look at that war, it's the war, as a different war than the war that John's been talking about up to this point, Yeah. And so anyway, I said all that to say I look at that as the Roman Jewish war. And I think there's a really good parallel. John says Gog and Magog. And what is that? That's a footnote. That's a hyperlink to take you back to something to think about. It's a footnote. It's a hyperlink to take you back to Ezekiel 38 and 39. Oh, so John's saying, with this war, think Gog and Magog. Well, if you're correct, if I'm correct, if James Jordan is correct, that's the events of the book of Esther. And what happens in Esther is you have the enemy of God's people, Haman, in league with the empire of the day, Persia, in a conspiracy to annihilate God's people. And then what happens? The tables are turned.
Right, exactly.
And in the book of Revelation, think about it. If this is the Roman Jewish war, at first, what's going on? Nero, the beast, what's he doing? He's persecuting the church. So and we know, and you talk about this a lot, Gary, in the book of Acts and throughout the New Testament, who are the persecutors of God's people? It's the Jews. So basically what you have then is the empire of the day, Rome, in league with the enemies of God's people, the Jews, persecutors of God's people, conspiring to do God's people in. But then what happens? The tables turn. The beast turns on the harlot. So I think that was, John just used that, Gog and Magog. It's think Gog and Magog.
Just like the
telegraph to his readers that the tables are going to turn.
Just think Jezebel, which
exactly.
Think Babylon,
Sodom and
Egypt, and so forth. So it's all
the Old Testament references he uses, and that's the thing. Just real quick, one more thing. Like, we don't realize they didn't have footnotes back then. They didn't have chapter and verse references. So if I'm writing, or Gary's writing, or anyone's writing a book, and we want them to think about a certain passage, we can drop a footnote, or we can put in parentheses Ezekiel 38, verse 11. But they didn't have the ability to do that.
Right.
But we want the reader to go all the way back to Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, the whole context. They didn't have footnotes. They couldn't use chapter and verse references. So what do? You take a small slice of that and you plug it into your writing. That was their footnotes. That was their hyperlinks.
Yeah,
so
go back and read the full context.
That's what's going on when John, does that. But anyway.
All right, Bob, we did it, and we gave you an extra minute. So you got 31 minutes and 25 seconds for your walk.
We have Eric Auger with us, and he says he listens to the Gary DeMar podcast while he does his run, and he likes it to be a half hour. So
we did this just for you.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay.
Thanks for podcasting with Gary DeMar. Please subscribe and share this with anyone you think really needs to hear it.